All right, we're back. We are COMP308 in the winter 2019 semester, and that is emerging technologies. I didn't expect a lot of people today in the second section because of the weather. I know that we're supposed to have quite a bit of weather today in terms of like snow and cold winds, the triple threat that they were talking about. Oh, it's a triple threat in Canada. Anyways, but what we're talking about today is we're going to do a bit of a review of what we did last week, and we're also going to be learning new stuff. For some of you, we'll be starting off with an intro to TypeScript. For some of you, it's a review of TypeScript, which is good. And you're going to say, why TypeScript? Because, well, TypeScript is going to be a supporting technology we're going to be using with Angular, React, and a bunch of other stuff. So it's good to kind of understand from a high level how it works, right? And then we'll do a little exercise at the end of the class that has to do with launching a Node server. So we're going to be talking about Node and mean stack in more detail today, as well as some additional things. First things first, though, what I'd like to do is I put up the outline to the course that is up on eCentennial. So if you actually look at if you go to content and if you look to overview, this is the outline that we have for the course. I kind of populated it in there. One thing to note is the plan. Two things. One thing is the number of assignments that we're going to have are going to be less. Like I said, I'm probably going to reduce this number as opposed to have 6. That's too many. I'll probably drop it down a lot, probably to 4 or 3. And the reason for this is because I find this is just too many for this class, and I prefer that you guys do something that you can build on. Where one kind of depends on the other one a little bit, and something that's practical. And right now you have nothing you can do practically with the stuff I've told you. So it doesn't make any sense for me to give you an assignment that's based on what I've told you today, right? Or even this week. So the plan is, again, kind of an intro to JavaScript and so on. And Node.js is going to happen today. Next week is Express. And then we're going to get into Mongo the following week. So that's where we're at right now. And we're using a book, a few books that I talked about the book kind of at a high level last week. And I want to go into it a little bit more this week. And there's a reason for it. So there's actually 4 books that are recommended. One of them is the actual textbook, which is Mean Web Development, second edition, which is from 2016, that talks about how to do mean stack and Node and Express. And Angular, I believe it covers Angular 2. Now we're at Angular 6, right, in a couple of years. And again, we're looking at like 3 years ago. I still think this is a great book. I think it's a really comprehensive book, and some of the stuff that's here is still available to us and still usable. The other 3 books are MERN Quick Start Guide, this one, which is new from 2018. Hands-on microservices with Node.js, new in 2018, and hands-on machine learning with JavaScript, also new in 2018. Now, here's a great thing. If you go to Pact, and I don't represent Pact, but if you go to Pact right now, Pact has a $5 sale on, right? And you can get all of these books, the e-book version of all these books for $5 each, US, right? So still, I think it's a great deal, guys. $5, that means $20 US, $20 US. You can get 4 ebooks that are complete with code examples and everything else. You can't go wrong with this kind of level of stuff. If you wait a little longer, we're talking about like 80% off the book price, right? So to me, this is a really great deal. I recommend getting them. I know you can get them for free. And if you have a Toronto Public Library card, or if you have through eCentennial, if you go to Safari Books online, you can access them for free. But it's not the same as having your own PDF, all right? And I recommend this. Now, if you're going to buy the book and have a physical book, it's not $5. But the actual textbook in PDF format for $5, guys, I can't tell you how I bought them. Like, I just hands-on, I just took them. I don't mind. I mean, and I recommend it because it's good background stuff. It's 2018. I mean, it's not going to go stale for at least a couple of years. So, but maybe it'll last till the end of this year or 2020. But the stuff that's in the books is all the modern stuff that we need to produce modern web applications, from anything from a small website to enterprise level stuff that you can do with the mean stack and Node.js, and to become a full stack developer. I think there's some really great learnings in there. So I can't, kind of stress enough. And I recommend you get them or have access to the material somehow, whether through Safari Books Online or through Pact. All right. Which? The third link to the website. Pact? Sure, I can do that. Pact Books. Yeah, sure, I can put this on Slack. Yeah. So this is definitely something that you want to grab. You haven't had a chance to already. And they have their $5 sale. They also have Pact Video to do a lot of stuff with video tutorials and stuff. And the best part about it, they also give you code examples, right? All the code examples for the books are actually online and downloadable, right? Even whether you buy the book or not, right? Which is kind of cool. So so go up there, take a look at that Pact Pub. I think I think it's a good outfit, and they there's a lot of really good information there. Okay, so that's the first order of business done. Next one is I want to talk about the course in terms of what we're doing today. So we talked about, like last week, it was kind of an intro to Visual Studio Code. Is there anyone new that wasn't here last week? All right, so we got a couple people, 3 people, and there was a bunch of people from the first section that were brand new and stuff like that, and they hadn't they weren't here last week. Guys, I can't stress enough again that you need to watch those videos from last week. I can't reteach some of that stuff in the detail that I went into. It's like, mostly setup is what I did last week. And I try and break up some of the setup across different lectures, so it's not all in one week. That would be deadly. Not just for the amount of work, but also it can be quite boring to just watch setup the whole time. But if somehow you weren't able to make it last week or whatever, you need to do those videos or go through the program. You had an exercise that was due last week, which is GitHub and how to do, kind of source control. We also made a web app with bootstraps. Let's go over some of the stuff we did last week just as a review anyway. So we talked about Git in GitHub. And I also mentioned inside of our eCentennial that we have our GitHub repository that I'm using is from Centennial College. So github.com/Centennial College. All of my code files are going to be shared there for you. I've already done a couple of new projects from this morning's class. Now notice there's 2A and 2B, and you guys are going to have 2C and 2D today, right? That's how it's going to go. So I'm going to always kind of repeat the same stuff I've done in the morning class with you guys from an exercise perspective so we can do it together, right? But this is our code archive where you can get kind of the latest stuff that we've been up to. If you can't keep up, you can always say something like, Tom, push, right? Push it to GitHub, break my phone, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Sorry, break the phone. So yeah, so please, if you have a chance to do that, do it here. Also notice that there's a couple things. It tells you the language, like mostly HTML. Here's just pure JavaScript. And in this one here, I've also used, notice that it's not just HTML, but I've also used TypeScript and a bunch of other stuff. So again, take a look at this, because when we go through it, you'll have a chance to go up online and look at the lessons that we're doing together. All right, so that's one thing we did. Then we also downloaded Node.js last week. So I said go here and grab the latest features from Node.js and download it and install it on your machine. Notice that the version is 11.7, and last week we installed. Let me just show you what happened. Right? Look. This is important. Node -v, and it's 11.6 last week 11.6, this week 11.7. So again, this highlights that the web is constantly in flux, and this is continuing to move and morph and change, so that this version continues to march on, right? Why is that a thing? Why is it important? Who cares? Well, because that means that it doesn't take long for the stuff that we do to maybe have different changes enough that it might break what we're doing. Do I have this on? I hope not. So that's part of it. So part of it is, things are changing. So we used Node.js only last week to use NPM, which is the Node Package Manager, which we talked about, the way to get stuff from the internet, download it, and install it into your applications. That's what we use Node.js for, really, at the end of the day, right, last week. We also talked about Visual Studio Code, which is the editor that of my choice that I'm using. You can use whatever editor makes sense for you. I'm not going to train you in another editor. It'll be purely in Visual Studio Code. However, if you like Atom, or a really good alternate might be something like WebStorm. I don't know if you ever heard of WebStorm. Some of you may have. WebStorm is a great product, I would say, by guys from JetBrains. JetBrains, they also produce Android Studio and a bunch of other really cool stuff. IntelliJ IDEA. They have a really great suite of products. C Lion for C++ programming and everything else. These guys are a professional outfit that Google depends on for some of their stuff, right? And I think it's worthwhile to take a look at them. They also have PHP Storm if you're a PHP person. So a really cool tool, a suite of products that you can see. Again, don't work for them, but they have a lot of awesome tools. They're professional, right? Their outfit, and they've come up with their own language for Android, Kotlin. Really, they really developed Kotlin a lot, which I think is awesome. So they're a big shop that creates stuff. It's proprietary, so that means it costs. It's not free. However, if you're a student, you can use their products for free as long as you're a student. But they have amazing code hinting, and it's perfect for things like Node.js development, web development, JavaScript, all that stuff. It is an IDE, which means it does wrap your stuff in a project, but it's another alternative, right? So if you use something like this, it's fine. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code because it's free and open source and quick. That's what I recommend. But I can't not mention these guys. I think it would be a disservice to you guys not to know about WebStorm. All right. Other competitors are Atom and Brackets and Sublime Text, Notepad++, and Visual Studio. But remember that just because Visual Studio is the big bad boy from Microsoft doesn't mean it's the best and only tool you can use. I want you to think about this. When you program in Java, do you use Visual Studio? No. You're going to use NetBeans. You're going to use, maybe Eclipse, right? Maybe IntelliJ from these guys, from the guys from that make WebStorm, right? So something else. You're not going to use Visual Studio because Visual Studio is not made for Java, right? At least it's not their primary language of choice, right? If you're going to use C++, probably Visual Studio is what I'm going to use these days. That's just the main language. C#, for sure, Visual Studio, 100% Visual Studio. But if I'm going to do JavaScript and JavaScript stuff, Visual Studio is just too fat for me, right? And I don't mean that in a real negative connotation. She's too fat for me. It's not like that. It's more like, Visual Studio is too big. And a lot of times the quick tools that I want to do, the things that I want to do personally for me, make more sense from a command line perspective to do them there than to use Visual Studio and have Visual Studio do a lot of the work, the heavy lifting for me without knowing what's going on, right? So, and sometimes it can cause a problem for me personally because of something is working and I don't know how it worked, and I go back and I check, and now this time it doesn't work. There's some bugs related to some of the things I like to do, especially the bleeding edge stuff that I'm doing with Angular and Node. All right, so that's the IDE of choice. We talked about that last week. We also said, hey, let's make things look nice with Bootstrap. So I talked about, Bootstrap. If you go to getbootstrap.com, that we need your stuff to look nice. It's not just enough to make it functional. So I don't expect that any of you are designers. So I've given you a front-end framework like this. As an alternate, you can always use Foundation from Zerb, which is actually really cool. Again, there's just two front-end frameworks. Zerb and the Foundation framework has not been as popular in lately as it has been in the past, but it's a great front-end framework, very similar to Bootstrap. One thing I don't want you guys to do, whether you're using Bootstrap or Foundation or something else, there's other ones. There's material. There's a material palette as well that you can use. What I don't want you to do is please do not download any templates for this class. So don't go to Theme Forest and download a template for Angular or for Bootstrap. I want you to use just the raw tools. You can still make things look quite nice with them. So if you ask me, say like, Tom, I really found a cool template for Bootstrap, the answer is going to be no. All right, I'm not going to let you do that this semester. So please don't do that. Okay, use Bootstrap. Like make it up. Use some CSS. Build your stuff with Bootstrap, but not a template. Okay, there are some themes, like themes that come with Bootstrap, that are paid for themes. That's the stuff that you can look at. And this is what I'm talking about. Why would you pay $50 for something that you probably can get away with not doing, right? Do they look great? Yes, they do. But I mean, again, unless you're going to sell it, I don't recommend it. However, if you have some kind of requirement that you think you can't solve by yourself, something you want to do, let me know. But for the most part, in your mind, think a no is the answer. All right. I'm just saying. So that's the first thing. So that's what we kind of did. Mostly last week, we got you to do a very simple web application. And one thing I didn't have a chance to do with you, and I put it up on Slack today for the earlier team, is when I'm going to ask you to unzip a bunch of stuff over and over again. Please use 7-zip. So please, if you can download that right now, that would be good. I don't want you to use RAR in any way. So please do not use WinRAR. I will not accept stuff with WinRAR later on. It'll only be with 7-zip or zip. So .zip. 7-zip, what they do is if you go there, they actually take the .zip format and the .7z format. I don't care about the 7z format. What the good thing is it creates a context in your folder. So if I go here to any kind of Windows folder that I have, here's some of the stuff we're going to be talking about this week. And if I right click, you can see that 7-zip is right inside of my contexts right here in my file folders and structure here, File Explorer. So this is a kind of a good integration. So I recommend something like this, and it's a free download. There's no cost to it. It is not compatible with Mac operating system, so we won't be able to do it there. There's other unarchivers and so on you can use. But for Windows, please use 7-zip. It might solve your problems. And also, it reduces this idea of having additional folders when you download from GitHub. One exercise we did earlier today is, how about showing you what the solution is for downloading from GitHub? So if I went to GitHub and I went to last week's lesson, 1B. By the way, a couple of people forked me on GitHub, and that's okay. And they kind of sent me stuff up from GitHub. I know when you fork me, by the way, it kind of shows up. But let's suppose you did that and you want to submit this lesson 1B. Then if I want to download this stuff, I can click on download, and then I'll download the zip file. It'll go to my downloads folder. There it is. And you can see that it says compressed folder tools, right? So I don't want this. So if I go to downloads, you can see that here's my lesson 1B. There's a couple of them from lesson 1A. If I have 7-zip, I can right click onto this and I can say kind of extract. Don't use extract here. That would be like, all the files would be like, it's almost like dumping the files out of the garbage. That would be bad. Do this extract to a particular folder. That's probably the safest option, extract to. And if you do that on the bottom of your downloads, chances are there's going to be this folder that says something, the name of the lesson -master. So I'm going to grab this, cut it, and then somewhere on my messy desktop, right, I'm going to paste it like this. So here's the file from last week. I'm just showing you how to do this. There's my master folder. Notice that there's only something, whatever the thing we did last week, COMP308 W2019. So again, all of my lessons and videos are coded this way. COMP308, the course code, W2019, the session, so winter 2019, the lesson 1B, and then if there's any parts or whatever will be here. But in this case, it also includes something called master, and that's indicating the master branch. That's where I downloaded from, okay? So why wouldn't it work for some people? Because it's not complete, right? If I actually open up Visual Studio Code, and if you try and make my stuff run the way it is, so here's this thing right here. If I just drag and drop it in here, so what's missing, guys? Why wouldn't this work? What do I have to do to make this thing work? Node modules is what I'm hearing. Yeah, node modules, right? If I just try and run it like this, it won't work. So I'm showing you the solution from last week's exercise. Pretty simple. I'd have to go into, again, in Visual Studio Code, I press Control, backtick, That's the hotkey. You need to know these hotkeys, guys. Control backtick, which is just the key underneath the escape key on your keyboard. And it brings up your terminal, which is integrated in your Visual Studio Code. And if I was to type in npm node package manager install, what that'll do is it'll go out, grab all the stuff that I need, and it'll install it in here. All the node modules will be here. Okay. So that's what you need to do and make it work. Last week I also installed Light Server. So I did kind of a npm install. You can also do, for npm install, you can also do npm I. And if I do npm I -g for global and then light-server, what that'll do is it'll do the same thing as an npm install. The -g is global installation. So it'll install it in the global namespace. Okay, so that's what it does, which means that any project can use it, not just my current project. If I don't put the -g, it's only for my current project that I'm installing that package. Okay. So again, here's my Light Server. And by the way, notice that I installed it again. It's not going to hurt me. I can install the same package globally as many times as I want. Okay. Yes. Clone. Oh, you clone my file. You clone my. So that gives you, if you clone, what happens is it also clones my commits and also clones my remote. That's why it's not a good thing, right? Because then otherwise you can't put it. Yeah, no. Cloning is good if you want to. If you and I are working on a project together and you clone my Git repo, GitHub repo, what happens is you get everything, including the remote information, which would be my remote, and you'd also get all of our commits that we're doing together, right? But in this case, yeah, not yet. No, not yet. We're going to get something. We're going to do something else similar to that. But no, what I'd like is your own. So when you download your own, don't clone. For now, just unzip it like this and make it work. And then we'll talk about how to do this later. But cloning is a good practice if you want to. If you have a repository somewhere, and let's say you're working on another machine, you're at work, you create a repository, you come home, and you want to continue with the commits, and you clone the repo to your desktop or something. You work on it, do more commits, and then push everything up to GitHub. And now your GitHub has additional commits. Of course they're going to call, that are adding on to the commits that you had before. But if you're just downloading a package, example from a source like me, and we're not collaborating, then just download the zip file. Okay, so if I run this thing, if I type in light-server now, right, because I installed the server and it's a global command, it's available to me on my command line, press enter, what it's going to do is it's going to kick up my browser, the default browser for my machine, and in my case, it's Chrome, and it's going to show us my website, the website that I have. Notice it says localhost 3000. Localhost is it's kind of a friendly name for port or IP 127.0.0.1, which is the loopback address. That's what it is, a loopback address from my machine, which means when I put 127.0.0.1, it points to my machine. And 3000 is the port, so you have IP address and port. And so really what's happening here is I have a mini node server that is running in the background right here. This is a node server that's what Light Server is. It's a package that actually creates a mini node server locally to your machine that's allowing us to serve up our files, right? And that's what it is. So yeah, this is pretty cool. And it's pretty comprehensive, and it has browser sync. And browser sync allows us to do things like this. If I go to my index.html as a good example, and I want to change something that I see on my index.html, for example, I have a container with the Jumbotron, and it says this is simple hero unit, blah, 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 blah. And if I want to change all this to say, like, instead of hello world, I want to say goodbye world. So I'll say goodbye cruel world. How about that? Goodbye cruel world, right? There we go. And maybe change it. And I did this. Now notice, going back to this, I haven't changed it yet. Here's hello world, right? Once I save it though, I'll save it, Control S, go back, boom. So browser sync, what it does is it watches for any changes. And anytime I change something in HTML, CSS, or whatever, it automatically syncs up my changes and refreshes my browser. So it cuts down steps for me, because otherwise I'd have to do all that myself. I'd have to, do it, save it, sync it, go back to my browser, refresh, and it's an extra step. And this way you see your changes right away. Some other people, what they do is they have larger screens and they have their browser kind of over here, right? And then they have their editor over here. Now I don't have a lot of real estate because I'm also broadcasting, but just bear with me when I do this. So let's suppose I have my editor and I want to make this hello world again. Watch what's happening on my browser. So I type in hello world and I press save, right? It automatically updates my browser immediately. And they do this thing so they can work here, code here, and see the changes immediately on the right? Problem with that is that I'm also compressed, so I'm not seeing it in full desktop mode, which may not be right. And that's why they have multiple screens. They have one screen for coding. This is a good process. If I had multiple screens, it'd be awesome. And a second screen for the user interface or the response, whatever the view that I'm looking at would be on the right, and my code maybe would be on the left, or vice versa. All right, depending on how you like to code. So that's kind of what we did last week. We kind of built a very simple website with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? And if you looked at it also, we had in our scripts file, we had this app.js file, and we talked about the idea of having a closure like this. This is a closure, and there's a special name for this closure called an IFI, an immediately invoke function expression, which is really a self-executing anonymous function that happens. So anything that's in here automatically executes when my window loads. And for extra protection, what I also do is I also make it so that I have a little event listener that waits for the window to load before I call my start function. Alternatively, if I really care, I can still do this, start, and not even have this, and it would work, right? Because my IFI would execute immediately when it's called, and I've installed it at the bottom of my index.html, which is right here. As soon as I execute line 99 in my index.html, what it's going to do is going to take my app.js, plug it into that space, almost like inflate it. That's what it's going to do, like a balloon. Now I've got all my my script in there. It's going to go through here. It's going to declare this variable, my functional variable. It's going to make this start function and immediately execute it. So kind of similar to this. I still like to do this because I don't want loose function declarations in here like this. I prefer it to be a callback function, especially when it comes to timings. Sometimes it's just better and easier to do this, right? That's why I do it this way, okay? But it serves the same functional purpose at the end of the day, okay? Pretty much. So we talked about that. We also talked about some ECMAScript 6 things. We said that, hey, I don't want you to use vars anymore. Please use lets and const. Those are the things I want you to go with. So this lets. We talked about hoisting and how vars, any var statement, that actually gets hoisted by JavaScript to the top. That's what happens. That's why we avoid using vars. And we also talked about template strings, which this is one of. This is a template string, right? This is the new backtick instead of the double quotes. That's what we talked about, and how we can interpolate or inject the value of a variable right in here by using this $ curly brace syntax like this, right? So we talked about that, and that's the new standard for ECMAScript 6, or 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, whatever you want to call it, right? It's up to this year, 2019. Yay. And so we talked about that, and we also did a bunch of other stuff in terms of talking about JavaScript. One thing I didn't do in this class, I don't believe that I did in the first one, is you can also do things with CSS in your console. And one thing I want to add is, some people asked about that. What you can do in your console is you can add an additional little layer like this, right? So you have your, so if I say something like %C, right? So let's just do this like this. I'll do it actually this way. So if I put %C in here, right, inside of my app started, right, %C, and then at the end, I add in my CSS. Let's just do it on another line so you guys can see it all in one line. What I can do here is in my CSS, I can specify CSS for the console, which is kind of different. So I can do something like, well, I want my font dash size to be like 20 pixels, And I also want my color to be blue, right? And you're going to go, what the heck are you talking about, Tom? Why would you do something crazy like this? What does this mean? Well, that means I can color my console log. Okay, so if I actually ran this thing, saved it, and I go back to here, and let's just make this large again so we can see what I'm talking about. Again, to get to the console from the browser that we're going to be using, I right-click, I go to Inspect, and I go to Console. And yeah, if I did it right, which I didn't, right, then you'd see this app started in blue. That's what it's supposed to be, right? However, that's not the case here. But it's also not giving me an error, right? That's the one thing to note. Like, even though I said like font size 20 and color is blue, what's supposed to happen is that my console log, did I just do something wrong? Is supposed to actually turn blue. Yeah, but it's kind of in quotations right now, right? See? So yeah, this is because it's in the backtick, right? It's in the backtick part. And I have an example of that, which I will fix. I just want to show you that it's possible. That's why I'm doing it. So if I go to last week's lesson, and if you ever have a question about how to do stuff, like I'm doing right now, I'm going to go back. Is it totally useful to do something like this? I mean, it's neat, kind of thing. I think there's nothing wrong with it, but let's see what I did last week. %C. Oh yeah, I did this. Yeah. I did the exact same thing. I don't know. It looks exactly the same. The only thing I did was, this is also in, if you notice, these are all backticks as well. So that should totally work. Font dash size and color, which is what I did, right? So that's the exact same thing I did, which is, how about the parens? Yeah. See, I knew I forgot something. And so, so what it looks like is, yeah, if I refresh, you can see that it says uncaught syntax error, unexpected token, close bracket. Because what's happening is I got an extra close bracket down here, and that's what happened. I think it's probably tricked, but that doesn't seem to work. Console log. Maybe it needs to be on the same line. It's like it's got a weird. Yeah, it has to be backticks. Has to be backticks because that's the whole idea. Again, it should appear there. One thing I did use, I used this, which I didn't do in my first one. So I just kind of, if I take that out and I do this, it still should be blue. And if I go back to what I did before with my stuff, it like literally is exactly the same. But here, oh yeah. That's bad, man. That's bad. See these little ridiculous things, and of course there it is. There's upstarts. That's what it looked like. So that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it's just a stupid bug that you don't see, but in your mind you're not seeing it, but everyone else can see it, like you guys, right? Which is good. I like it. So so if I did this, I don't need this. I don't need my local variables. Who cares about that? But I talked about this last week. One thing is you have a lot of control. So why am I showing you the color stuff? Because you can do other things like font style. So if I say, well, color blue, and I also want my font style or font weight, let's say font weight bold. Let's just make my font weight bold. Then you can make your, your responses on the console a little bigger. And varying this, you can actually have like kind of, you make it look whatever you like, however you want. So you can, it's more interactive, and it gives you kind of, it blows up in terms of how you can recognize changes to your application. So keep this in mind because we're going to be using something like this as we go. Nothing new. I talked about it in the first class, but I didn't talk about it in your class. I just missed it. But just want to make sure. So again, JavaScript is pretty cool. And we're also going to talk about something new today. We're going to talk about TypeScript. Some of you know it, some of you don't. So TypeScriptLang.org is where I want you guys to go. TypeScriptLang.org. And if you look on TypeScriptLang.org, let's go here first. You can see that TypeScript is kind of a wrapper around JavaScript. That's what it is. They call it a superset of JavaScript. So TypeScript is JavaScript. You can use JavaScript in a TS file. The only thing is that TS files are not recognized by a browser. So then you're going to say, well, why bother with TypeScript? Well, TypeScript is really used by Angular, React, and Node, right? And a bunch of other stuff. Vue.js we're going to talk about, and a bunch of other things, right? TypeScript is a technology now that's supported by Microsoft and continually evolving, right? And accepted by Google and others. And what it does is it takes care of the exact same problems we talked about last week with JavaScript. JavaScript we talked about is unstructured. We said that, right? JavaScript is no good, but in terms of for developers, they look at it and they go, "Wow, it's really ugly. There's no typing. It's loosely typed and it's flexible, and so flexible you can hang yourself with it, like we talked about, right? And I want something more structured, and it doesn't have good code hinting, and I can do whatever I want in JavaScript, and it's not going to complain." And this is all true, right? So TypeScript was created for creating web applications and to assist people to adopt new features in JavaScript, right? JavaScript, the problem with JavaScript is, by nature, it's so unstructured that developers can't stand it, right? So they're used to things like C# or C++ or Java or whatever. And so what TypeScript does for us is allows us to do a few things. And I think the first one for me when I use TypeScript is tooling, all right, or code hinting, right? So tooling, if I have an error in my code, I want my IDE to tell me, right? I want JavaScript to say there's a problem. Like I get that when I'm doing things with C++, C#, Java, name the other language, right? But not so with JavaScript, eh? I get no errors. That's number one. Second thing is I want help coding. I want code hinting and code completion, right? I don't get that with JavaScript typically. So that's one thing. And so I want something to help me do that. And also, I want code hinting and code completion for any library that I access. If I want to access jQuery and I want code completion for jQuery, I want that. I want to be able to do that. And no language or IDE gives you that for jQuery or for any popular library out there, except for TypeScript. So TypeScript is good for those kind of things. TypeScript helps me code things in Node.js and Express and Angular and other things. And TypeScript is a key technology for Angular, React, and Vue.js, front-end technologies we're going to be talking about today. So kind of coding modern web applications without TypeScript actually is a hindrance. So you need to know it. So we're going to talk about how to do that today, right? So let's start. So think about the biggest problems we've had with JavaScript to date. We don't have any conventions in terms of variable names. So sometimes what I want to do is I want to say something like this. I want to say let my variable, right? And I want to declare it as a string. Whenever we declare a variable in JavaScript, right? I use camel case like this, and I say my variable is a string, right? I can do that in TypeScript, and I can say that my variable string that equals to Tom or whatever you want, right? Here's my variable. Take a look what happens on the JavaScript side. It converts let to var, right? And you're going to say, why is that? And it kills my declaration. And the reason why it's happening here in the playground in TypeScript is because it's converting from ECMAScript whatever, the latest version of JavaScript, into ECMAScript 5. ECMAScript 5 is actually the most compatible version of ECMAScript for JavaScript across newer and older browsers. So that's why it's the target of conversions for the most part with here on the playground. However, you can make TypeScript convert to anything you like. If you want to make it convert to ECMAScript 6 or the latest version of ECMAScript, you can do that with some configuration, which we're going to talk about today. So this is one thing. So doing this makes it clear that Tom is a string. And if I go down here and I say, well, my variable now, well, that equals to 5, right? Well, guess what? TypeScript is going to say, meh. Look, I'm getting code hinting. And it says type 5 is not assignable to type string, right? I want that. I want people to tell me I made a mistake. I don't want to code and JavaScript to say, okay, right? JavaScript will let you do whatever you want, man. If you want to shoot yourself in the foot, it's going to go, yeah, do it. TypeScript is going to scream. TypeScript is going to say, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Don't do it, right? It's like an assistant, right, to help you. So this is the tooling part of the house, right, to help me tool, to do stuff, right? What about other things? Like I want to do things like document.getElementById sometimes. So I want to type document. Take a look. I'm getting like code hinting, right? Dot and then get element by ID. It gives me all the code hinting that I want, right? So TypeScript is really good that way. And to be fair, most modern editors are pretty good. Visual Studio by itself will do this, right? And so will Visual Studio Code. Like both those two things will do it, no problem, right? But this is the kind of stuff I want. So originally, by the way, for JavaScript, there was no code editor out there or development environment that would do it for you. You needed TypeScript for that. Now it's evolved. Eventually, maybe we won't need TypeScript, but I think now we do still, okay? So that's, kind of the second thing that it does. The other thing is it makes JavaScript easier. So this is kind of okay. But what about when I do something like this? I want to make a class. Follow me here. Let's do it together. I want to make a class, and I want to make a class called person. Here's my person class. Yay. Okay, cool. Take a look on the right. So I've got 2 lines of code here, and I've got a bunch of stuff that looks like gobbledygook for the average person. They're like, what? That's like spaghetti code. What does that mean? Well, you know what it means. This is our iffy. Take a look. Here's our iffy right here. This is the outside, and this is another function that's on the inside that represents the class, the constructor. And here I'm returning that constructor outside of this thing, right? So that's what this does, right? And this class is this in ECMAScript 5, right? Cool. And if I have a constructor in different languages, sometimes you use the same name. So person, Java, C#, or even C++, right? Here I can just go like this, constructor, and I kind of do one of these. Now there's no difference because I haven't done anything with the constructor. So if you look on the right hand side, there's nothing. So this is the JavaScript conversion. Here's TypeScript. But what about when I go a little bit crazy and I say, well, you know what? I really would like some private, instance variables up here, right? I want to be able to code those. And I also want to have some public properties, just like I do in C#, or public properties, C# or Java or any modern language. I want to have public getters and setters, right? And you know what? Maybe some private methods down here. So I want to say private methods. I'm just outlining this with comments, right? Just to kind of give you an idea of what I want, right? And there's some public methods down here, right? I want to be able to have some public methods. Cool. Notice that it takes some of this stuff, but then it kind of ignores this stuff, right? And it's good because you know what? There's nothing down here. So when I convert stuff, if I have a lot of nothing, then when it converts back to JavaScript, I get nothing, right? Which is kind of good. Okay, but what about private instance variables? I can use the keyword private now, right? And my private instance variable will be something like, well, okay, let's think about this. A person. I maybe have an age. And age is of type number, of type is colon, of type number. That's how you read it, right? And there is the number type in JavaScript. And maybe I also have a private underscore name. I'm using the underscore as a convention. Some people don't like that. But I use underscore as a convention to denote private. Whenever you look at a variable that has underscore, immediately you know it's a private variable, a private instance member. Some people prefer M underscore, which means member. Some people prefer that you also put the data type of the member. So example, private underscore age number or num age or some weird thing like that. So they can start pulling up stuff, and anything that's a number will come up first, like underscore num, and then all the number variables will come up when you do your code hinting. But I'm good with this, age and name. So now on the right, nothing. Why? Haven't used them. Haven't used them, don't need them. JavaScript doesn't put it in. There's nothing that's done here so far. But what about when I do something like this? I want in my constructor to take an age variable which is of type string. Well, when I do that, I get this. The only thing that happens on the JavaScript side is I get age and name because JavaScript doesn't care. Doesn't care what it is. It's just 2 parameters. They're called age and name, right? TypeScript cares though, and knows that I want a number type for this, and it'll scream if I don't have anything. It'll complain. And then if I do something like this is bad. It's not object oriented, but I could do something like this. I could say, well, this dot underscore age is equal to age, and this dot underscore name is equal to name. Notice that I have to use the this context keyword that basically points to the person class itself. That's what it refers to the person class. I'm saying, so for this object that I'm creating, I'm taking the class variable and assigning a value that's coming into my constructor from the parameter, the local parameter that I'm getting, and I'm assigning it to the age variable. This is good, and I want to be able to do that with my constructor, but better would be if I had getters and setters. Now take a look at this. Almost identical, right? It's almost the same. It's just that this person is the constructor, and here we're using the keyword constructor. By the way, it's the exact same way in ECMAScript 6. So if you're using ECMAScript 6, your stuff would look like this, but remove private. You don't need private, because ECMAScript 6 doesn't have the notion of private or public or protected, whereas TypeScript we do. Okay? How about public properties? How do they look? And this is something you cannot do with ECMAScript 6. Again, this is where TypeScript is better. I can use the keyword get, right? And I can say something like, well, what about if I want to get name, and I want to, when I get my name, I want to return a string. So there's my string. And in my name, I want to return this _name. That's your getter for the name. And I can do the same thing for the setter, set name. And I can, it's like a method, right? And in my name, I want some kind of new name or another name, which is of type string. That's what I'm looking for. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say something like this _name name is equal to name, new name. Yeah, so, and people are always confused. I always do that. People are always confused by, why the heck do I need getters and setters, get accessors and set accessors? Do I have to do it just because they say I have to do it for object-oriented programming? Yeah. Well, there's some really great advantages to doing this. One is not just data hiding, which is why we use object-oriented programming, but also because this is a method that you can do other things inside of. I can do things like tracking, logging. I can do other, I can use that other applications when I do setting and getting. Like, what if I want to notify something that I've changed my name? I can do a notification. It's almost like an event handling right through here. And I can't do that when I assign things directly. I can't. Just a direct assignment, right? Now, take a look at the difference. What's happened here? I've got a prototype. I use my define property. Now, this is normal. I mean, it's the object itself. Object keyword in JavaScript is I'm actually accessing the object prototype, which is like the object superclass in Java, C#, C++, whatever. All languages have some kind of super duper class. And object is the superclass for JavaScript, kind of. And then I'm defining a property that's a method that's built into the object superclass of type. Well, where is it going? It's going to the person prototype, which means to this person class. That's where it's going. And I have to give a friendly name to it, which is name. And then I say, well, there's two. There's a get function and a set function. That's what it is. And this is what they do. And are they enumerable and configurable? Yes, they are. And that means I can kind of cycle through them and do whatever I have to do. Now, this is great, but unreadable for the average developer. They'll be like, what the heck is that? I'm not used to that. I'm used to classical inheritance that looks, and classical, making classes like this, not prototype stuff like this. This is prototypal, kind of class-based stuff. And so because of this, and if you come from C#, this is way easier than this. And this is where I say TypeScript makes JavaScript easier, right? Let's keep going. So I want to add a getter and setter for my age. I can go get, again, age, and I want to get, it's going to return a number. I have, remember the return type comes after the method name. Method signature is the return type. That's the return type with a colon. And then what we say is return this._age, right, which is what's returned. And the same thing goes with the setter, set age, and we may have some kind of new age. I like new age, the new age books. But new age, a new age we're going to set, and we're going to say that this._age is equal to new age. And then now we have our getters and setters. Yay. And I saved it again. Great. So curious, would you want to use the getter and setters or direct access down here inside the constructor? What are your thoughts? There's advantage and disadvantage to both, by the way. Direct access is, if you're going to do this, I mean, you might as well not even have getters and setters. So, I mean, you could do just this, and it's totally possible in the constructor. again, this is a choice. It's not a convention. And the reason for this, the reason why I say it's a choice is I choose to use the getters and setters as much as possible, right? However, some people disagree when it comes to constructors that they should direct access, right? And that's the difference between constructors and getters and setters. However, if you're going to do the fancy stuff that's happening in the getter and setter, the methods, inside the constructor again, that doesn't make any sense. So you might as well use the getters and setters in here. That's why I did this. Okay, so I'm just using the getter and setter instead of using the direct access to the private data members in the constructor. Great. So I've done this, and now I need a method for my person. Maybe I want to, have that, says hello method, and I want to make it public. So public, bring it up here, so you can see it. Says hello. The person says hello. It returns void. So I'm not going to return anything when I say hello. And I want to use a console.log, with some kind of backtick. Remember we talked about this backtick, where I use some kind of fancy CSS to say the person. So this person, this dot name. So the getter for the name this time says hello, right? And maybe we can add some CSS at the bottom, which is like font size. We'll make it 20 pixels, and we'll also make our color blue. And we'll use why not? We'll use a font weight bold on this one too. Why not? There we go. That's all the stuff that we can do. And notice the changes on the right. So even if we do this on the left, look at what happens on the right. So we have two properties that we defined, one for name and the other one for age. This is what it looks like in pure JavaScript. And then when we go down, this is interesting. What it does is it converts our backtick template strings into regular concatenation, right? Like this. All right, so regular concatenation. And now, if you want to, we can run this thing, right? If you want to. But first, let's go back and instantiate an object of type of person. So I could say something like this. I could say that const, right, person is equal to a new person. And it gives me code hinting now. It says, hey, you need an age and a name. Well, what about if I put it the other way around? What if I put Tom here by accident and my age here? Like, I don't know, I'm not really 30, but I'd like to be, right? And I put that in there. Well, it complains. It says, wait a minute, argument of type Tom is not assignable to parameter of type number. Again, tooling for me. This is good. This helps me. I made a mistake, and it told me I made a mistake, right? And that's what I want. I want my tool to tell me that I'm making mistakes, to help me code faster. I want my tool to do that. And this is one here. Look, I've only given myself one parameter, but expecting two. JavaScript won't do that. JavaScript will take one, right? And it'll be happy to take it. Thank you very much for giving me only one, right? I need an age first. So I need 30, let's say a number, and then me, right? So it'll complain if I don't do it this way. So I've done this. Okay, great. And then I can say something like person dot says hello, whatever that says hello thing is, right? So I've done this now, and you can see that on the right, it's identical in this particular stage. Okay, I can run it in my playground. If I click the run button, it'll actually run. And if I go into inspect in this blank, I can go into a console, and you can see that Tom says hello in the right way of doing it. That converts to this, right? So this is really good. This is the playground. To me, it's very helpful in understanding what's going on. So this is how this class person works. So it's not bad, but take a look at the stuff on the left. This is where I say it makes JavaScript easier. You can understand what I'm doing here, right? Here, for the average person, they want to pull their hair out. They're like, wait, what about if I made the wrong, put the wrong thing in here? Or if I didn't do my getter and setter? There's a particular syntax that's quite difficult for you to learn. Is it worthwhile learning, however? Yes, it is. It's definitely worth learning this syntax, right? And to understand what's going on in the background, right? One thing to note, this is nice and easy. And it's like magic, right? And I said this kind of earlier to the other class. And magic, like in the storybooks, when you do like in mythology, when you get like a witch to make a potion for you so you get younger, or I would love that. Or if, you get a witch to make a potion for you that heals you, or it makes you faster or stronger and makes you into a superhero like let's say Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse. You got to see that movie. But if you see that, right, it's a great movie. Anything like that, you know, there's a price for the magic. Usually you have to give up your blood, your firstborn or something, right? So too is TypeScript. There's a price for this magic, and it's called transpilation, right, or transpiling. I have to convert from TypeScript, this beautiful form, into this ugly form, almost like the Medusa, right? I have this really beautiful looking illusion over here, which is TypeScript. Then I got to go to the real thing, right, which is the ugly form, the JavaScript form. And in order for me to do that, I got to transpile from TypeScript into JavaScript, because modern browsers do not accept the TS file. They only like JS. They don't know about TS. For people who've done my web game class, please bear with me. You already know all this stuff already, because we did it before. But for people who've never done it before, then this is all new to you. And so, you know, keep watching, right? So I need to transpile. I need to be able to go from one to the other. Transpile is like compile, kind of, but I'm doing it in real time, and I'm almost like translating from the beautiful TypeScript that I got on the left to the JavaScript, the standard JavaScript that I got on the right. All right. And so we combine those two words like translation and compile into something that sounds like transpile, which translates and compiles at the same time. Okay. There is another program that does this called Babel, right? You can actually do the same thing with ECMAScript 6. And Babel is one of those tools that are used for transpiling from, you know, kind of modern ECMAScript 2016 into old school ECMAScript, you know, ES5, right? So Babel does it as well. It doesn't do it for JavaScript, but it does work. If you notice, it does the exact same stuff here in Babel. Babel is being used from a lot from React. The React folks, they do this kind of stuff, as opposed to transpiling. So you don't need to use TypeScript to transpile, or you may not. You may need to do this, you know, as an example for other languages. So Babel, we're going to talk about Babel in this course later on. Okay. But for now, we care about TypeScript. We care about doing this. All right. So that's the first part. So a bit of object-oriented programming review. Okay. How do I do, you know, inheritance? I mean, inheritance is like, if I pro a class without inheritance, I mean, what the heck, right? We need to do inheritance. Let's make another class. So, you know, further down, you know, I want to make another class down here, and I did this a little differently this morning, but I want to make another class. So we'll say class, and we'll make a new class called student, which is of type of person, right? And here's how it goes, which we extends, right? So class student extends person, right? And notice on the right, when we say class student extends person, we have this. And look at on the top here, it does all this that's what extends does, all this, right? To make sure that it inherits. And by the way, we don't need to do that in modern ECMAScript 6 because it understands extends, but we're transpiling back to a previous version of JavaScript where there was no extends, right? So the extends keyword is actually quite powerful because it actually does a lot of prototypal inheritance work for us, right? And whenever we have a constructor, again, I always start talking about my classes like this: some kind of private instance variables, right, or members, some public properties, some constructor. I want that constructor to be in there. Maybe some private methods, and maybe some public methods. I want to kind of make my classes like that, right? I'm just using comments here to outline what my class should look like, right? Any class in any language, right? This is pseudocode for you. It should work, right? This is the stuff you should be doing when you're doing object-oriented programming. So what's different from a student compared to a regular person? Well, maybe students have student IDs, and maybe they study, not just greet people, right? So we'll do that. We'll say that a student has a private underscore student ID, which is of type, I don't know, we'll make it string. So we can do numbers and strings in this fake student, okay? In your case, in our institution, it's only numbers, but we'll make it so that a student has a student ID with a string. Yay. And you know what? We'll make some public properties again. So we'll say that we'll say get student ID. So if I go student ID, for the getter, I return a string, And all I'm doing here is just doing exactly that. I'm going to return this dot underscore student ID for now. And then for the setter part, it's the same thing. I can say set student ID, which is some kind of new ID, which is, of course, a string. And I can say that this dot underscore student ID is equal to new ID. There we go. Again, it's up to you how you sort these out, but I recommend having at least some private instance members and public properties, right? Two parts. So get accessor and set mutator. All right, pretty simple. All right. Constructor. So for the constructor, because it's inheriting, right, we need to call the super constructor, right? So we're going to go constructor, and we know the constructor is going to need to call the super, right? So if I go my super constructor, what is that? It needs to call, it needs to send in age, name. Those are the two things I need, right? In order for me to satisfy that, I'm probably going to ask for an age, name, and a student ID from the constructor. So age, which is of type number, name, which is of type string, and student ID, which is of type string in this case, right? And I'm passing in age and name into the super constructor, which is this, age and name. And that satisfies the super constructor, right? So again, I want you to think about this in terms of regular program, like a regular programming language, like a C# or Java, same thing, right? I mean, this kind of stuff. It just, we don't call super, we call base sometimes, or we call something else, depending on the language. All right. So that's what it looks like, super, right? And then, you know, we also want to set the student ID to student ID. So we can say something like this dot, and I'm going to use the student ID, the property student ID. This student ID is equal to student ID, right? So I want to do that. So that kind of sets the student ID for the constructor for the student. Okay, and let's make one private public method. It'll be a public method that is, you know, studies. I'll go up in a second. Remember, I made my choice. I said that I'd rather use the getter and setter as opposed to, I could directly access this, but if I'm doing extra funky things in here, I want them to be done in the constructor too. All right, but that's my choice. You can design it your way. So the student studies, it returns void because I'm not actually returning or getting anything in the studies method. And the studies method is going to do like a, I don't know, console log. Let's do this again. We can say that. So again, we'll use backticks. We'll say, so we'll say again, we'll say backtick, and we'll say $, curly brace, this dot name. Notice we're using the name property from the person class. This dot name is studying and has a student ID of, and then curly bracket this, this dot student ID, right? And if I did this, I know it's kind of hard to see. Maybe I'll break it down into two levels. I'll just do, I'm trying to figure out how to do this. I don't know if that doesn't help. Okay, I'm trying to show you just so you can see it because it'll hide it unless I show it. So it's kind of, this name is studying and has a student ID of blah, blah, whatever it is, and that's it. Okay, and why? So we can test both, you know, the previous class and this class. That's what we're doing here, right? And just to be different, we'll make it so it's a different color. So instead of it being blue, we'll make it green, right? Go. So we'll do comma, and we'll add in a %C here. So we'll say %C in the beginning for the CSS class. And we put a comma in here so we can add in the CSS class right in here, which we have to do in quotations, right? So we'll say something like, again, font size, let's say make it 18 pixels instead of 20. And we'll also make the color green. And we'll also have the, we're not going to have a font weight of bold, just a regular green color. There we go, just to make it different. All right, so that is our studies, student studies. And you know what? For us to test this, we're going to make a new student underneath here. So we'll say that const student is equal to a new student. We'll say that, this person is 20, and we'll call him David. Why not? He's 20 years old, like David guy. And we'll say, I know, eh? And then the student ID is like, I don't know, P or D for David, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever. Maybe David would have had like first and last name, D something, and then maybe in some institutions they might have that. I don't know any of that did that, but we're just making this up. And then I can say that student dot studies, right? Actually, let's say hi with the student. So student says hello first because he can do that because he's inheriting from the person class. And student also studies, right? So whatever that student is. So you can see that we're going to have both situations here. And now let's take a look at the stuff on the right. So this is the stuff on the left. Nice, beautiful TypeScript. And this is the stuff on the right where we have a couple of classes. We have this big extends method that's right here that's being reused, right, by both person and student. You can see that student uses this thing called supercall, which it calls a super constructor and passes in age and name. So it satisfies the super constructor, right? And we also have an extra property for student, which is student ID on the right-hand side. We also do this new student studies. Notice that when I add a method to a class, I do student, which is the name of the class, prototype, the prototype of that class. That's how it works in JavaScript. JavaScript has a prototype, a default prototype, if you will. And then studies is the name of the method. And then we say is equal to this anonymous function. Well, what that's saying is, here's my anonymous function. Let's make a reference to the new studies method to this anonymous function. So we create that function and assign it to the prototype of the student class. Woof, right? Crazy. And then the rest is the same. So how does this look if we run it? We can run this thing. And if I look at my inspector and I look here, I can see this. Tom says hello. David says hello. And David is studying and has a student ID of blah, blah. Right? So standard object-oriented programming review, just in JavaScript instead of, in TypeScript, as opposed to C# or C++ or Java, right? And this is great. This is fantastic. But really what we've done here is, we've kind of made it so that the person class is an abstract class. I mean, I don't know anybody who's just a person and nothing else, right? So chances we want to make our abstract class. We can do something like this. Abstract, you can actually use the abstract keyword. Abstract class person. When we do that, we have an error. We raise an error because we can't create a concrete class from an abstract class. So this person, new person, can't work because we've flagged our person class as abstract, right? And what that does is it basically says that it's going to be the blueprint for other classes, but we're not going to instantiate objects of that class. So abstract class. So we have to, we can delete this or we can just comment it away. Let's just comment it away. We can use multi-line comments that look like this in both JavaScript and in TypeScript. And that works again. So that is abstract class. We also have another kind of construct in TypeScript called an interface. So we can say, well, what if I made an interface, as an example, called greeter, right? So we can say interface greeter. And my interface greeter has a public says hello method, says hello. We can kind of do this where the says hello method returns void. And you can see that says hello is something that person would kind of comply to because we have a says hello method here, right? So if I did that, I could implement so the greeter interface inside my person class. I could say something like my abstract class person implements, right, greeter. And if I did this, it would comply, right? Because I have this method. This method makes me comply to the contract that I've created with my says hello greeter method, right? That's what it does. So again, interfaces are used a lot of times for identification purposes. They're used for structuring a class the same way you want it to be. They force other users of subclasses to create certain patterns in their classes, and this is great. And we can do this. One thing that's really great about them in TypeScript is they cost nothing, because guess what? There's no interface on the right-hand side whatsoever. So you can use this for additional tooling, more feedback from the class telling you, hey, you missed something, right? Which is a good thing. However, and this is really good. Like, for example, let's say I forgot to add in my says hello method somehow. So I'll just comment this out to show you, right? And you're going to get an error at the top that says, hey, just like normal, this person incorrectly implements the interface greeter. Because guess what? I don't have a says hello method. It tells you it's missing, right? So that's what interfaces a lot are for. We can also use the type of comparison operator that we have in JavaScript to say, is this type of greeter? And if person is not a type of greeter, then guess what? It doesn't comply, and we can check that, right? So we can do that with everything else. So that's why person complains here. You get that? Because I'm not implementing the greeter interface because I don't have a says hello method. I've commented it out, right? If I put it back, then we're complying with that interface, and we're good to go, right? It takes away that stuff. So again, we've gone to full-blown inheritance and polymorphism, okay, with JavaScript. And this is fantastic. This is the stuff we want in JavaScript. We don't want loosey-goosey, kind of JavaScript that for enterprise-level applications. We just don't want it. It doesn't make any sense for developers. It's not friendly. Some people don't like TypeScript either because they're like, well, then I got to transpile. Yeah, but there's advantages, and we'll talk about transpilation in a second. One more thing. If I've got this, this is all in one. Sometimes what I want to do is I want to compartmentalize my code. Let's just take this away for now because it makes our life more complex just for a little bit. And I'm just going to get rid of this. And what if I have this class and the other class, I want them to be part of a namespace or module. Namespaces are really used for organizational purposes and for, kind of breaking files across different, or breaking classes across different files and folders. And we're going to do that in this course. So the way you would do that in TypeScript is like this, module or namespace, the name of the namespace, let's just call it objects. And inside module objects, right, we're going to take the abstract class person as well as the concrete class student, right? And we're going to cut it like this. We're going to put it inside of our module objects. There's module objects. We've just put in, we've encapsulated or wrapped my two classes inside of objects, the objects module. Okay, when I do that, you can see now that I have a problem down here because there is no such thing as student. We have to access it with objects.student, right? Because objects is the namespace dot. We have to use the dot accessor method for student. And if it gives you an error, it says student does not exist on type of objects. Why? Because if you notice, we're not sharing the student class in any way. Student is inside of the module. Until we export that or make it visible, we expose the class outside of the module, it's locked in there. It's only for that module. And the way to do that with TypeScript is to use the export keyword. So export class student extends person, and now on the bottom we have no errors. So this is a little bit new for some developers, but what it's doing is it allows us to use objects.student, that's the namespace, dot accessor method, student, the class name. Okay. I'm also using const here, which is okay because guess what? My student in this case is not going to mutate. It's always going to be the same student. I'm not going to modify them or point to some other student object. So this is okay. And if you notice on the bottom there, it converts my const to a var, right? Because it doesn't understand const in ECMAScript 2015. Oh, sorry, ECMAScript 5. But take a look at this. When I put it inside of this object module, what it actually did is it encapsulated it twice. So here's my iffy for my class, and then here's my iffy for my objects module. So I actually put a closure within a closure. That's what it actually did. It encapsulated or enclosed my classes inside of another closure. That's what module does. right? By the way, module pattern does not exist this way in ECMAScript 6, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. Doesn't exist. Should, and you'll see why later on. It has another. We do module pattern a different way. We use the require keyword, which we're going to see later on, and import and export. Okay, so yes, nice. But what about if my const, I want to declare it on different lines? Sometimes what happens is I declare my student as a type of student. So I can say something like, well, my student is of type objects.student. I can be explicit, right? Here, like this. Student is of type objects.student. Yay! And I want to make this on a different line. So I want to kind of put a semicolon here. And then on a different line, I want to say, well, guess what? But my student is actually a new student. And then we get this error. And the reason why we're getting this error is because const declarations must be initialized immediately. So what this means is whenever I use a const, I have to declare and initialize I have to instantiate at the same time. However, if I don't want to do that, then I can't use const. I need to use let, which will take away that issue. And this allows me to decouple my declaration and initialization on different lines. And sometimes it's important to do that because I want to declare all my variables here, but I want to instantiate them down there when I'm ready. I don't want to allocate memory until I need to, right? Because here, when I do let, I'm not allocating memory. What I'm doing is I'm telling the compiler that, hey, my student variable is going to have this kind of shape, right? Doesn't have it yet, but I will need that. And then in most languages, that's what it does. In JavaScript, however, we do allocate memory for it right here, okay? And here, we just assign it. By the way, even if I use const here and I convert it to JavaScript, it would still work because JavaScript doesn't care. As long as they can do it, it doesn't matter. All right, so that's the difference between let and const. Const makes it immutable, not even a declaration. You can't even, separate those two things. You have a question? Tooling, response. It's for you. It's not for them. It's not for JavaScript. JavaScript, like I said, is just like it's a blunt instrument, like 007 in his movies, right? He's an assassin. He'll just go do whatever he has to do, right? There's no elegance in the way it executes. It just does what you tell it to do, right? I mean, I'm being extreme here, right? Whereas TypeScript is like, whoa, hey, wait a minute, I got a ballet dance around what I want to do, and you know what? You're just not doing it for me, friend, right? Whatever you're telling me is just not working out, right? It's more sensitive than regular JavaScript, which is good, right? Sensitivity is good because it gives us good feedback and it allows us to code better and reduces errors. That's what it is, error reduction. And also, when we communicate with other programmers, we can set up a style that everyone has to follow with interfaces and classes and all this other stuff. And JavaScript, regular JavaScript, doesn't really support that as much, right? So anyway, so this is the stuff. And you're going to say, that's great, Tom, but how do I make this work in a real file? Let's make it work in a real file, all right? So I'm going to create a new version of my code here. So what I'm going to do is I've got this lesson that I downloaded, this lesson 1 master, right, B. And I'm going to copy it. So I'm going to copy it here like this. I'm going to paste it. So here it is. And when I paste code, it just copies everything into another folder, right? If I did this with my master, and I'm going to call this 2. If I'm going to make this 2C, because I got 2A and B from the previous class, we'll just call this 2C. So it's for you guys. One thing to note, because I downloaded it, notice that there's something missing. I don't have an assets folder. Why is that? Because up on GitHub, assets was empty. And remember, we don't push things up on GitHub if it's empty. So one thing, I could do is add an assets folder here. The other thing is that if you look at my previous lesson 2B lesson 1B, the original lesson 1B, not the master, but the one I did last week with you guys, which is this one. Let's take a look at this. It also had this .git folder. .git, remember, is where the hidden repository information is kept, right? If I was to copy this one from my desktop, I recommend for now you would delete this. However, in the future, we're going to do what you said, David, which is downloading or cloning our own files and then removing the remote, because there's a remote reference, remember? We make a remote. The remote is actually the connection between our local repository and GitHub. We would just remove that, and we would make our own new connection to another repository, and that would totally work, okay? I'm not going to do it this week. I'll do it next week, because this is too much in 1 week. It's already too much, right, for some of you. Because I've taught you TypeScript in like 1 day, and usually we take like, I don't know, a month, to do it properly, right? But we don't have time for that. So here's our lesson 2C, and I want to use this one to put it up on GitHub. So again, I'm going to pull up my Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to drag and drop my lesson 2C into here. So now it's the new lesson, right? And I want to do the GitHub stuff with you yet again, so you see it one more time, okay? A couple things to change because we just renamed it, and it's the exact same lesson from lesson 1. We need to make some changes. One of them is inside of my package.json file. My package.json file kind of names the package. So it's like, again, W2019 lesson 1B. For completeness, I'd want to change that to 1C. All right. Also, in my README file, we have like demo project, and this is 1B. We didn't want to change this to 1C. Anywhere where the other stuff is mentioned, maybe even in my README file, I'd probably change this stuff and say, it's not just demo project for Node.js and emerging technologies, but actually for TypeScript. We'll say TypeScript, right? Because that's what we did this week. We did TypeScript. So I want to put this up online now. I want to save this, and I want to save the package. And what's the first command? I'm going to use control backtick to kind of bring up my integrated terminal. What's the first command? What do I do to add this up? I want to create a new Git repository. What is it? Git init. Oh, not here. Here. Git init. Okay, cool. So what does git init do? It creates the repository. It creates that hidden folder in your operating system files. Cool. What's the next command? Git add what? Why dot? What's dot? Git add dot. What is it? Takes all the stuff. Okay, where does it go? Where's all git add dot go to? Where? No, it goes to the staging area. Remember, there's a temporary area called the staging area. All I'm doing here is I'm flagging all the files. I'm ticking off all the files that I'm going to put in the staging area, right? These are the files that I want to add to my new commit. Okay, so this is what this does. All right, so what's the next command? Git add dot, and then what's the next command? Git commit, right? Git commit, and what's the syntax? Sorry, minus M4 message, right? And then the name of the message with the friendly message, which usually has two things: initial commit or first commit, right? So we'll say initial commit. So those are the two options as a convention. Cool, we've done that. Are we done? No, because we don't have a repository online. Let's do that. So let's make a repository online. So again, I'm going to go to my repositories here, which is, again, I've shared this with you online on eCentennial. For those people who are new this week, if you look at eCentennial, please look there, right? On eCentennial, I have in week 1, if you notice, there's a Slack invite. Please answer the Slack invite and connect with Slack with me, right? Sorry, David. I know I'm a little slower today than normal. Here's the GitHub code archive. Go in there, and there's also a YouTube playlist where this actual video is being stored right now. Okay, so that's where you have to look. And I also have an exercise from last week. I would accept it this week because people are new, people are moving around, shifting stuff around. If you complete your exercise, I will give you credit for it. If you haven't had a chance to do that, it's basically doing the exercise. Please follow the videos to do this exercise. And then if you do that, I'll give you credit. All right. But anyway, so I need to add in a new repository. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click new. I'm going to call this repository, again, the name of the course, 308, the semester, winter 2019, the lesson 2, and the version C for us. And then if we did everything correctly, if we press enter, we're going to have the repository. Last week, I just copy pasted. This week, I'm going to do it manually. Let's do it together manually. So here, I'm going to say git remote add origin, right? So what is this? I want to add a remote called origin. That's the name of my connection. That's all it's doing. And then, in quotations or not, https://github.com/ the name of the account, my account, which is Centennial College. Oh, let's see if I get this right. And then the name of my repository, COMP308-W2019-lesson 2c.git. And then that should be it. If I press enter, we're good to go. That's the remote. I've added the remote. Now, again, guys, copy pasting is way easier than this and way faster. If it gives it to you online, save time. I'm showing you if you want to do it by hand, how to do it. And then what I want to do is I want to git push for the first time and only the first time -u origin master. So this says push all my files across the origin remote into the master branch unconditionally. That's what it does. Okay. If I do that, if I made no mistakes, it'll push it up. If you did this for the first time, if you're new to GitHub and Git, it'll ask you to log in and it'll store your login and password information. Okay, now, if I go back up here, you can see that I've got my my new lesson. Okay, and this is everything that we talked about today so far. However, and this is where I'm trying to rush this so David can see it here. However, what we want to do with my scripts here is I want to replace the script stuff with all the stuff I did in TypeScriptLang.org in my playground. Let's do that. So I'm going to go back to TypeScriptLang.org, grab all this stuff, including my modules, copy all this stuff, and put it inside here. However, we talked about this thing about transpilation, right? And it says module objects. It says it can only be listed in a TS file. Of course it can. I need to change this from app.js to app.ts. So I rename this thing app.ts. Instantly now it's a TypeScript file. And instantly we have a problem because TypeScript doesn't work on a browser. We're linking to JavaScript on the bottom. Notice JavaScript, not TypeScript. We need to transpile. Well, in order for us to transpile, backtick, let's clean this up. The first thing you need to do is install TypeScript. We're going to say npm install -g for global. We want it globally, right? TypeScript, right? And when we do that, it's going to go out, grab TypeScript, the module. I've already done this today. It doesn't matter. And install it on my system. If you don't do this, you cannot use TypeScript. So please do this now, all of you. Okay? So we're going through this process. Right? So this is one of the installations we're doing today. All right, so we've got TypeScript. Great. How do I transpile? Well, the easiest way to do that once I have TypeScript is just TSC, TypeScript compiler. And if I press enter, it'll convert anything from TypeScript to JavaScript. But guess what? We're missing a component. We're missing the configuration file for the transpiler, which we have to put in place. In order for us to do that, we have to, by hand, create a new file called tsconfig.json. This is the price of the magic that we talked about before, right? We have magic we're going to use. Price of the magic is configuration and a bit more complexity, right? Not much. We only do this one time. So when we make a tsconfig.json file, it is a JSON file, which means we have to put it in JSON format. We put curly braces around here. And then what we do around the curly braces is we press Control Space, which gives us some options. One of them is compiler options. And inside my compiler options, I want to kind of indicate a couple things. One is the target. So if I type Control Space again and type in target, I want my target to be ECMAScript 5. By the way, if you don't know what your target is, you can Control Space and it'll give you options. Which one? ECMAScript 5, right? Next, I also want my module pattern to be something that I talk about, right? And I want to choose the CommonJS module pattern for now. And the last thing I want is I also want source maps to be true. And what source maps do for us, whenever we debug TypeScript-based applications, I want to have the browser point at the TypeScript stuff, not at my JavaScript stuff, right? JavaScript is the end result. TypeScript is my script language, right? So I want to point there. So once I've got that tsconfig.json file like this, and this is, by the way, the minimum options you need to make TypeScript work. Angular has an armful of options like this for compilation, right, for transpiling. and so do other places, other front-end languages. Okay, so again, target, whatever. These are all done. Now I'm ready to transpile finally. Let's go back. So control backtick. If I type in TSC and press enter, now what it's going to do is inside my scripts folder, it creates two more files, my app.js, which looks like this, right? And my app.js map, right? Well, that's weird because we have all this and all I got was this. What the heck? What happened to the rest of the stuff? And where did this come from? Well, because we didn't really save this one. See, the app.ts has never been saved. Let's save it. And did it transpile? Hell no, we got to do it again. Wow, what a pain. I got to do this every single time. We don't have to. We can say TSC minus W, which is, it sets up a watch task. So if I do this, TSC minus W, it actually watches for any changes. So if I go back to this, now you can see that my TypeScript task is here, and my JavaScript task has finally been transpiled perfectly, exactly how we saw it online. Okay? So every time we make a change now, we don't have to worry because it automatically transpiles for us. But what if we forget that command? What if we forget to do that? That would be a problem. And sometimes I don't like using the terminal so much like this. I prefer it to be something that's part of my editor. We can use Control-Shift-B. Try this out now in Visual Studio Code. Control-Shift-B. And as long as you have the TypeScript configuration file, you can choose either to build once or to watch and build, which is what I prefer. If I click this, then it'll equivalently do the watch task that's built into to this. Anytime I add a new TypeScript file, it'll automatically create the JavaScript file and the map file. Anytime I change anything, if I update stuff or whatever, it'll automatically transpile, which is the way to go. Are we good? We're not done yet. Bear with me because we're going to do one more thing. Well, hey, look, we've been doing this TypeScript stuff. This is fantastic, right? But guess what? Everything is in one file. That sucks, right? That really sucks. We never code like that in C#. We break it down across files. Let's do that. So in order for us to do that, we need to make another folder. I usually put the namespace of the module and the folder name should be the same. All right, so let's just call this folder objects. And inside my object folder, I want to create two new files, one for the person class and one for the student class. Let's do that. So new file, we'll call this person.ts. And as soon as I do that, because I'm watching TS files, the other files get created automatically because I'm in my watch task. And again, the same thing goes for my student. So I go student.ts, and then bam, they're empty right now. But what I've actually done, and I'm just going to close some of these off. In fact, if you want to close all these open editors, you can do that by clicking this button, and it creates a little bit more space for you. So I've created this in these objects folder. I've created all these really quickly. And what I want to do is take the stuff from my app.ts right here and copy paste it into these files. Let's try this out. So I'm going to take the whole module objects thing, this whole part, not including this part, right? So all this, I'm going to cut it. And I'm going to go into my person.ts file and paste it. So this is my module objects, yay. But I don't want this one. I don't want my student class. Okay, so then I go do all this. One thing to note, though, if I did this and I want my student class to have access to my abstract person, I need to export this too. Right, so that's something that I want to be able to do. I want other objects or classes to have access to this person class that's trapped inside of module objects. Okay. Same thing goes with my student class. So my student class, I kind of copy paste. I still have this module object, but I don't need my person class anymore because it's in the other file. Right. So up to here, kill it. And now I have this student class, and they're broken down across different files. Fantastic. But this is bad, right? Because this is my app.ts now is out in the open. That's ugly, right? Let's get back my iffy again. And from again, from a view perspective, this is an immediately invoked function expression, which is a self-executing anonymous function. That's what it is. It looks like this. funky syntax, or we have this kind of thing. And what we want to do, we don't care about this. What we want to do, we want to take this stuff and put it inside of this, but we probably want to encapsulate that within another function. We did last week. And you know what? Not only do we want to do that, but we also want to use that window.add event listener. We want to listen for the load event to happen and call the start function when that happens. So that is something that we want to do. Notice that we're getting good tooling for this. We know what object is. We know that student requires age, number, and everything else. This is all the stuff that we've done with TypeScript allows us to do that, right? Getting good feedback. One thing that prevents us from making it work 100% is that it still needs to be put in my index.html file, this kind of module pattern. So in my index.html file, we need to include both the student and my person in here. So script, source, script, source. We want to go / again, scripts / objects / objects. That's okay. I'll do it by hand. And then / person.js. That's the first one. And underneath that, I copy paste this one, which is almost identical. I want to look at student.js. All right. So we need to include those. Otherwise, app.js doesn't know anything about it. Okay. Once we've done this, and we have this module pattern, right, that we've kind of set up, now we can set up our light server to run with it. So again, control backtick, right? We can set up another console window by using this plus button, and we can do something like light-server. If everything is correct, it'll bring up our website, and if I right-click and go inspect, I can see that in our console, we say David says hello, and David is studying and has a student ID of blah, blah, blah. So that's full-blown, that's the full cycle right there, all right? Questions around TypeScript, integration, breaking across files. I did it kind of all in one. Don't be afraid. I know it's a lot, but it's recorded for you, right? This is the good thing. And the other good thing is that it's a kind of an intro to TypeScript. We're going to hit TypeScript again and again throughout the entire course. So it's not like the first or last time you're going to see it. But the power of TypeScript is the three things: tooling, right? We want to build tooling, code hinting, and ease of use when it comes to, it makes JavaScript easier and more powerful. Okay? I want to stop there. I want to pause the show, the movie right now. And then we'll come back and we'll do more of mean stack stuff. In the meantime, while we're doing that, I'm going to put this up on GitHub for you guys so you have access to this, and we'll go from there. Yes? Push, thank you. And I'll push all that up to GitHub. All right, thank you so much. I'll be back in 5 minutes with an update, and then we'll take, it's 3:07. We've kind of gone an hour and a half. Let's just take, you know what, let's take 15. It's a good time to break. Take 15, get a coffee. David can go too, and then we're good like that, right?
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for staying.